"Ma'am, if you've got nothing to hide, then you won't mind us taking a look." The officer's words echoed across the courthouse plaza with the kind of confidence that only came from believing everyone nearby would automatically agree with him. Conversations faded. Footsteps slowed. One by one, strangers turned their heads toward the scene unfolding beneath the bright Washington afternoon sun. Cell phones quietly appeared in waiting hands. Some people watched with curiosity. Others watched because they had seen scenes like this before and already thought they knew how they would end. Naomi Brooks stood perfectly still beside the granite fountain, one hand resting lightly on the worn leather strap of her dark brown purse. At 38, she carried herself with calm restraint rather than intimidation. Her charcoal gray coat had seen several winters, her sensible flats showed signs of daily use, and a neatly folded umbrella rested beneath her arm even though the forecast promised clear skies. There was nothing about her appearance that demanded attention, and perhaps that was exactly why Officer Ryan Mitchell had noticed her in the first place. He stepped closer, his polished badge catching the afternoon light. "We received a report about suspicious activity," he said, his voice measured enough to sound official but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "We need to inspect your bag." Naomi met his eyes without raising her voice. "Officer, may I ask what specifically made you believe I was involved?" Ryan barely paused before answering. "We'll ask the questions." The second officer shifted beside him, scanning the growing crowd as though expecting something dramatic to happen. A city bus rolled past, its brakes hissing softly before disappearing around the corner, leaving behind only the distant hum of traffic and the uncomfortable silence gathering between everyone present. Naomi slowly released the strap from her shoulder, careful not to make any sudden movement. "Please be careful with the documents inside," she said quietly. "They're important." Ryan gave a brief smile that never reached his eyes. "If they're legal, you've got nothing to worry about." Several people exchanged glances. A teenage delivery driver parked his bicycle against a bench. An elderly couple stopped halfway across the crosswalk. Somewhere behind them, someone whispered, "They're probably looking for drugs." Another voice answered almost immediately, "Looks like it." Naomi heard every word, but her expression never changed. She had learned years ago that dignity was often measured not by what people called you, but by what you refused to become in response. Ryan reached for the purse before she had fully extended it toward him. The leather shifted between their hands for only a moment before he pulled it away with practiced certainty. He rested it on the hood of the patrol vehicle parked along the curb. The courthouse itself towered only a few hundred feet away, its white columns glowing beneath the afternoon sun, the American flag moving gently in the breeze overhead. Lawyers hurried up the wide stone steps carrying briefcases. Clerks disappeared through revolving doors. None of them yet realized that the quiet confrontation happening just outside those walls was only seconds away from changing everything. Ryan unzipped the purse with absolute confidence, convinced he already knew exactly what he was about to find. Ryan Mitchell slipped on a pair of blue inspection gloves with deliberate precision, almost performing for the crowd that had gathered around the patrol car. He reached into the purse and began removing its contents one item at a time, placing everything across the warm metal hood in a neat row. A compact wallet, a small notebook with worn corners, reading glasses inside a simple fabric case, a stainless steel water bottle, a folded transit schedule. Nothing about the collection resembled the picture he seemed to have already created in his mind. He barely looked at the items before reaching deeper into the bag, convinced the important discovery was still waiting beneath them. Naomi remained exactly where she had been asked to stand, her hands loosely folded in front of her, watching quietly as the afternoon breeze lifted a few loose strands of her hair. She did not protest. She did not raise her voice. She simply followed, every movement with calm attention, especially when Ryan's hand approached a thick stack of folders secured with colored tabs. "Please keep those together," she said gently. "They are organized in a specific order." Ryan did not respond. He removed the folders anyway, laying them on the hood without opening them. One corner bent slightly against the windshield wiper. Naomi noticed immediately, but she said nothing more. The second officer shifted uneasily. Unlike Ryan, he no longer looked completely certain. He glanced at the documents, then toward the courthouse steps only a short walk away, where attorneys wearing dark suits continued entering through the security checkpoint. One middle-aged woman carrying a legal brief slowed her pace as she watched the search from across the plaza. She frowned for a moment before continuing inside, without saying a word. Around the growing circle of onlookers, quiet conversations spread like ripples across still water. Some assumed the officers had received reliable information. Others wondered whether the search had begun with little more than suspicion. Nobody truly knew. Ryan continued removing each item with increasing impatience. A phone charger, a packet of tissues, a small container holding medication clearly labeled by a neighborhood pharmacy, a pair of leather gloves, a travel mug receipt from earlier that morning. Every ordinary object seemed only to deepen his determination. "You carry a lot of paperwork," he finally remarked. Naomi nodded. "It is part of my work." "What kind of work?" Ryan asked without looking up. "Work that depends on accuracy," she answered calmly. Ryan gave a quiet laugh. "That does not answer the question." Naomi simply replied, "It answers enough." The response lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. A young law student standing near the fountain exchanged a puzzled glance with another observer. There was something unusual about the woman's composure. Most people subjected to public scrutiny became defensive, frightened, or angry. Naomi displayed none of those emotions. Instead, she watched her belongings with the careful attention of someone more concerned about damaged documents than damaged pride. Ryan reached the bottom compartment of the purse. His confident movements slowed slightly. The fabric lining concealed a separate zippered pocket he had not noticed before. He pulled the zipper open and reached inside. His fingertips brushed against something solid. Not plastic, not paper, metal wrapped inside a black leather presentation case. He paused for only a fraction of a second before withdrawing it into full view. The crowd instinctively leaned forward. Even Naomi's eyes settled quietly on the small case resting in Ryan's gloved hand. The afternoon noise seemed to soften as he turned it over, studying its weight before releasing the polished brass clasp with his thumb. Ryan pressed the brass clasp, and the leather case opened with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than the traffic surrounding the courthouse plaza. Inside, resting against deep navy velvet, lay a polished gold seal that caught the afternoon sunlight and reflected it across the hood of the patrol car. Around its edge were finely engraved words that Ryan recognized instantly, even before his mind accepted what his eyes were seeing. The seal bore the unmistakable insignia of the United States Federal Court. Beneath it rested a dark blue identification wallet embossed with matching gold lettering. Ryan frowned. His confident expression softened into uncertainty as he carefully lifted the wallet from its place. He opened it slowly. The crowd remained silent. Even the people who had been whispering moments earlier seemed to understand that something significant had just entered the story. Ryan studied the identification card inside. His eyes moved across the photograph first, then the name, Naomi Brooks, then the title beneath it. His breathing slowed. He read the line once, then again, as though expecting different words to appear the second time. His partner stepped closer. "What is it?" Ryan did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked from the identification back toward Naomi, who still stood quietly with her hands folded, showing neither satisfaction nor anger. She simply waited. The breeze carried the distant sound of courthouse bells marking the half hour. Ryan turned another page inside the leather wallet. Additional credentials appeared beneath protective sleeves. Authorization documents, security access certifications, judicial appointment records bearing embossed federal markings. Every page seemed more official than the last. The second officer leaned in farther. His face lost its color. "Ryan," he whispered carefully, "that does not look ordinary." Ryan swallowed. "No," he answered quietly. "It definitely is not." Across the plaza, the middle-aged attorney who had paused earlier had now stopped completely. She adjusted her glasses, recognizing the seal from where she stood. Her expression changed almost instantly. Without saying a word, she reached into her pocket, took out her phone, and quietly placed a call while continuing to watch the scene unfold. Several courthouse employees walking toward lunch slowed their pace as well. One of them glanced toward Naomi before looking directly at the identification still resting in Ryan's hands. Recognition spread silently across more than one face. Yet Naomi herself never interrupted. She simply allowed the truth to reveal itself without assistance. Ryan finally cleared his throat. "Miss Brooks," he began, his voice noticeably different from before. Naomi looked at him with the same composed expression she had carried since the beginning. Yes, officer. Why did you not tell us who you were? The question floated awkwardly between them. Naomi answered without hesitation. Because your decision should not depend on my title. Nobody spoke after that. The sentence settled over the crowd with unexpected weight. Ryan lowered his eyes toward the documents again. For the first time since the encounter had begun, he no longer appeared to be leading the situation. Instead, he looked like a man trying to understand the distance between confidence and assumption. His partner quietly removed his patrol cap, shifting uncomfortably as more courthouse employees gathered near the entrance. At that exact moment, the heavy glass doors at the top of the courthouse steps opened together. 3 individuals wearing dark federal security jackets emerged onto the broad staircase. One of them scanned the plaza, immediately spotted Naomi beside the patrol car, and changed direction without hesitation. Ryan noticed them approaching, then looked back at the gold seal still resting in his hands. The certainty that had carried him through every decision only minutes earlier had disappeared completely, replaced by a growing realization that this encounter was about to become far larger than a routine search. The 3 federal security officials crossed the plaza with calm, purposeful strides that immediately changed the atmosphere without anyone saying a single word. Their navy jackets carried discreet gold embroidery above the left pocket, and each displayed an identification badge before reaching the patrol car. The oldest among them, a silver-haired man with composed eyes, looked first at Naomi, then at the leather case still resting in Officer Ryan Mitchell's gloved hands. "Commissioner Brooks," he said with quiet respect, inclining his head slightly. "We have been expecting you for the judicial review session." Naomi answered with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Lawson. I apologize for arriving a few minutes late." Lawson's attention shifted toward Ryan. His expression remained professional, neither hostile nor emotional, but the silence between the 2 men carried unmistakable weight. "Officer," he said evenly, "may I ask why the commissioner's official credentials are currently outside her possession?" Ryan carefully held out the leather case as though it had suddenly become far heavier than its actual weight. "We were conducting an investigation based on suspicious behavior." Lawson accepted the credentials, inspected them briefly, then returned them to Naomi with obvious care. "Thank you." Naomi placed the identification back inside her purse before quietly organizing the scattered contents herself. She aligned each folder exactly as it had been before the search, smoothing a bent corner with her fingertips. The simple act somehow drew more attention than anything spoken during the encounter. Around the plaza, several spectators slowly lowered their phones. The excitement that had fueled their curiosity only minutes earlier had been replaced by something closer to reflection. Ryan watched Naomi restore order to her belongings without asking anyone else to help. The second officer finally stepped forward. "Ma'am, would you like us to assist?" Naomi looked up briefly. "Thank you, officer. I can manage." There was no bitterness in her voice, no sarcasm, only simple courtesy. That answer seemed to affect Ryan more deeply than any accusation could have. Lawson glanced toward the courthouse entrance where several attorneys had quietly gathered near the top of the steps. "The chief judge delayed the session by 10 minutes, he explained to Naomi. "Everyone is waiting upstairs." Naomi nodded once. "I appreciate their patience." Ryan hesitated before speaking again. "Commissioner Brooks." His voice lacked the certainty it had carried earlier. "I did not know who you were." Naomi closed the zipper of her purse before answering. That much was obvious. Ryan lowered his eyes. "Had I known?" She interrupted gently, not to embarrass him, but to finish the thought herself. "If you had known, would the search have happened differently?" Ryan opened his mouth, then stopped. The question required no immediate answer because everyone standing nearby already understood it. The issue was never the title inside the purse. It was everything that had happened before anyone knew the title existed. A soft breeze swept across the courthouse steps, stirring the American flag overhead. Somewhere nearby, the fountain continued its steady rhythm, as though the city itself had remained completely unaware that an ordinary afternoon had quietly become an unforgettable lesson. Lawson checked his watch before speaking once more. "Commissioner, the panel is ready whenever you are." Naomi adjusted the strap over her shoulder and took a single step toward the courthouse. Then she paused. She turned back toward Ryan, studying his face for only a moment. "Officer Mitchell," she said calmly, "please make sure every piece of body camera footage from today is preserved exactly as recorded." Ryan looked up immediately. "Yes, ma'am. Do not edit it. Do not summarize it. Let the complete record speak for itself." Ryan nodded. "Slowly. It will." Naomi gave a quiet smile that revealed neither victory nor resentment. "That is all I ask." Then, with the same calm dignity she had shown from the beginning, she turned and walked toward the wide marble steps. While behind her the plaza remained almost perfectly silent, and for the first time that afternoon, Ryan Mitchell understood that the most powerful evidence was not hidden inside the purse he had searched, but inside the choices every person made before discovering who someone truly was. Naomi climbed the wide marble steps without looking back, her pace steady and unhurried despite the dozens of eyes following her every movement. The courthouse doors opened before she reached them, and the federal security team escorted her inside with quiet professionalism. Behind the glass, the sounds of the busy city faded into a calm hush broken only by measured footsteps across polished stone floors. The lobby reflected warm afternoon light through towering windows, illuminating bronze plaques that honored generations of judges, clerks, and public servants. Naomi paused for a brief moment to straighten the folders inside her purse once more before continuing toward the private conference wing. Nothing in her expression suggested triumph. She carried herself exactly as she had outside, with the same calm dignity that had never depended on recognition. Back in the plaza, Officer Ryan Mitchell remained standing beside the patrol vehicle long after the crowd had begun to disperse. The certainty that had guided him only 30 minutes earlier had disappeared completely. His body camera indicator continued blinking quietly on his uniform, recording the silence that now surrounded him. His partner finally spoke. "Ryan, dispatch is asking whether the stop has been concluded." Ryan answered after a long pause. "Tell them it has." His partner hesitated. "Should I also notify the lieutenant?" Ryan looked toward the courthouse entrance before nodding once. "Yes. He needs to hear it from us before he hears it from someone else." Several witnesses walked away without saying much. The excitement that often followed public confrontations had been replaced by thoughtful conversations. A young college student who had recorded part of the encounter quietly deleted the caption he had started writing before posting the video online. An elderly veteran standing near the fountain shook his head slowly. "Sometimes," he said softly to no one in particular, "the first judgment is the wrong one." Nearby, the middle-aged attorney who had recognized the federal seal earlier approached Ryan with calm professionalism. "Officer," she said politely, "I have practiced law in this courthouse for 22 years. Ryan looked at her. "Yes, ma'am. I have seen good officers protect people with remarkable integrity." She paused briefly before continuing. "I have also seen how quickly assumptions can become permanent memories for the people on the receiving end." Ryan listened without interruption. "I understand." The attorney studied his expression for a moment. "Understanding begins after the mistake. Character is revealed by what happens next." With that, she adjusted her briefcase and walked toward the courthouse entrance. Ryan remained where he was, replaying every decision in his mind. He remembered noticing Naomi from across the plaza. He remembered deciding that her behavior looked suspicious before speaking to her. He remembered how confidently he had believed the search would confirm his expectations. Now each memory felt different. None of the facts had changed, yet every conclusion suddenly appeared painfully incomplete. Inside the courthouse, Naomi entered a large conference room where judges, legal scholars, and federal administrators were already seated around a polished oak table. As she arrived, several participants stood to greet her warmly. The chief judge smiled. "Commissioner Brooks, we are pleased you made it safely." Naomi returned the greeting with quiet grace. "Thank you for your patience." An unexpected delay occurred outside. The chief judge noticed nothing more in her tone than simple professionalism. She did not describe what had happened. She did not seek sympathy. She simply opened her folder, prepared her notes, and turned her attention to the work that had brought her there. Outside, Ryan finally removed his gloves and placed them carefully inside the patrol vehicle. For the first time in many years, he realized that earning public trust required far more than wearing a badge. It required seeing every person first as a citizen deserving fairness. Long before knowing anything about the title, they carried inside a leather wallet. The afternoon meeting concluded just before sunset, and as the last participants quietly gathered their notes, Naomi remained seated for a moment, watching the fading golden light stretch across the polished oak table. Beyond the tall courthouse windows, the city continued moving with its familiar rhythm. People hurried toward subway stations. Traffic lights changed in steady patterns. The fountain outside still sent gentle streams of water into the air, untouched by everything that had happened only hours earlier. Naomi closed the final folder, placed it carefully inside her purse, and rested her hand on the worn leather for a brief second. The faint crease left by the search was still visible near the zipper. She traced it lightly with her fingertips, not because she was upset about the purse itself, but because small marks often reminded people that moments passed while their consequences remained. As she walked through the nearly empty hallway, courthouse employees greeted her with warm smiles and quiet respect. She returned every greeting with the same kindness she always offered. None of them realized that only a short time before, she had stood outside surrounded by strangers who had reached conclusions before asking questions. She did not mention it. She preferred to let the day become part of her private memory instead of public conversation. Near the building's main entrance, the silver-haired federal security director, Mr. Lawson, caught up with her. "Commissioner Brooks," he said gently, "the chief judge wanted me to ask whether you would like us to file an immediate formal complaint." Naomi looked through the glass doors toward the plaza where the evening light painted long shadows across the marble steps. She remained silent for several seconds before answering. "The facts have already been preserved." Lawson nodded. "Yes. The recordings exist. The reports will exist. The witnesses were present." She smiled faintly. "The truth does not become stronger because we speak more loudly." Lawson studied her thoughtful expression. "You are remarkably calm." Naomi let out a slow breath. "Calm is something you practice long before you need it." They stepped outside together. The courthouse plaza looked completely different from earlier. The crowds had disappeared. Only a few office workers crossed the open square on their way home. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass from a nearby park, and the lowering sun reflected softly across the courthouse columns. Naomi paused beside the fountain. Water flowed continuously over smooth stone, never rushing, never forcing its path, yet shaping the surface year after year through quiet persistence. She watched it for a moment before speaking almost to herself. "Strength does not always sound loud." Lawson followed her gaze. "No," he replied. "Sometimes it sounds exactly like this." Neither of them said another word. A young maintenance worker pushing a cleaning cart smiled politely as he passed. Naomi smiled back with the same warmth she had shown judges, attorneys, security officers, and strangers alike. To her, respect was never measured by uniforms, titles, or occupations. It belonged to every person equally. Across the street, Officer Ryan Mitchell remained inside his parked patrol vehicle, completing paperwork under the fading daylight. Through the windshield, he noticed Naomi standing quietly beside the fountain. She had every opportunity to look toward him, yet she never did. She simply adjusted the strap of her purse and continued walking toward the sidewalk with steady confidence. Ryan watched until she disappeared beyond the row of maple trees lining the avenue. For reasons he could not fully explain, that silent departure stayed with him more powerfully than any speech ever could. In the growing stillness of the evening, he realized that some lessons were not delivered through punishment or anger. They arrived through dignity that refused to disappear, even when no one else had recognized it at first. The following morning, the Internal Standards Division assembled inside a modest conference room overlooking the same courthouse plaza where the previous day's encounter had unfolded. There were no television cameras, no reporters waiting outside the doors, and no dramatic speeches prepared in advance. Only facts, recorded evidence, written reports, and the quiet responsibility of reviewing them with fairness. Officer Ryan Mitchell sat at one end of the long table, wearing the same uniform that had always represented certainty to him. This time, however, certainty had been replaced by reflection. Across from him sat his lieutenant, two review officials, and a representative from the department's professional conduct office. A large monitor displayed the complete body camera recording exactly as Naomi Brooks had requested. No edits had been made. No moments had been removed. The video began with Ryan approaching Naomi in the courthouse plaza. The room remained silent as every word was heard again. When Ryan confidently announced that he intended to search her purse, no one interrupted the recording. They watched Naomi remain respectful. They watched her calmly ask that her documents be handled carefully. They watched assumptions form before evidence ever appeared. Then the recording reached the moment when the federal credentials were discovered. The room grew even quieter. One review official paused the video immediately after Naomi answered Ryan's question about why she had not revealed her position sooner. Her calm response echoed once again through the speakers. "Because your decision should not depend on my title." Nobody around the table spoke for several seconds. The lieutenant slowly removed his reading glasses and folded them on the table before looking directly at Ryan. "How many years have you served?" 14 years, Ryan answered honestly. "And during those 14 years, the lieutenant continued calmly, what has been the first principle we have repeated in every procedural review?" Ryan lowered his eyes briefly before answering. "Treat every citizen with fairness and evaluate facts before conclusions." The lieutenant nodded once. "Did that happen yesterday?" Ryan did not search for excuses. He did not blame dispatch. He did not blame anonymous reports or the pressure of making quick decisions. Instead, he answered with complete honesty. "No, sir. It did not." One of the review officials leaned forward. "Officer Mitchell, Commissioner Brooks did not file a personal complaint against you." Ryan looked up, surprised. "She did not." "No. She requested only that the complete record be preserved and reviewed according to department policy." The words settled heavily across the room. Ryan looked toward the frozen image on the monitor, where Naomi stood quietly beside the patrol vehicle, waiting with remarkable patience while strangers judged her. For the first time, he noticed details he had overlooked before. The careful way she held herself, the absence of anger in her voice, the dignity she maintained even after her belongings had been spread across the hood of the patrol car. The review official closed the case file. "Character is often revealed under pressure," she said thoughtfully. "Yesterday, Commissioner Brooks demonstrated hers. Today, you have an opportunity to demonstrate yours." Ryan slowly nodded. "I understand." Outside the conference room, the morning sun reflected against the courthouse windows just as it had the day before. Yet everything felt different now. The evidence had done more than establish facts. It had exposed the quiet distance between assumption and justice, reminding everyone involved that true professionalism was measured not by authority alone, but by the willingness to recognize mistakes, learn from them, and ensure that the next person standing on that same plaza would be met first with fairness instead of suspicion. 3 days later, Officer Ryan Mitchell stood once again outside the federal courthouse. But this time there were no flashing patrol lights, no gathering crowd, and no assumptions waiting to be made. The department had completed its initial review and required additional professional training, documented counseling, and procedural supervision before he would return to normal field assignments. The outcome was recorded according to policy, not because anyone had sought revenge, but because accountability existed to protect public trust. Ryan accepted every requirement without argument. As he waited near the fountain where everything had begun, he noticed Naomi Brooks leaving the courthouse after another long day of meetings. She carried the same weathered purse over her shoulder, walked with the same steady confidence, and greeted the courthouse staff with the same quiet kindness that had never changed. For a brief moment, Ryan considered simply walking away. It would have been easier. Instead, he took a slow breath and stepped forward. "Commissioner Brooks," he said respectfully. Naomi turned toward him. Her expression remained calm, neither warm nor cold, simply attentive. "Good afternoon, Officer Mitchell." Ryan removed his cap before speaking again. "I wanted to apologize to you in person, not because of the investigation or the review, but because I failed to give you the fairness every citizen deserves before I knew anything about you." Naomi listened without interrupting. Ryan continued carefully. "I kept replaying that day in my mind. I realized that I was looking for evidence to support a conclusion I had already reached instead of allowing the facts to guide me. That is not the officer I believed I had become, but it was the officer you encountered." The plaza remained quiet except for the gentle sound of water flowing through the fountain. Naomi looked toward the courthouse steps before returning her attention to Ryan. "Apologies matter," she said softly. but they matter most when they become different choices. Ryan nodded. I intend to make different choices. Naomi smiled faintly. Then your apology already has value. Ryan hesitated before asking one final question. May I ask why you chose not to file a personal complaint against me? Naomi rested one hand lightly on the strap of her purse. Because I wanted the truth to be examined, not my emotions. The purpose of accountability is improvement, not humiliation. Ryan lowered his eyes for a moment. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. Naomi answered with the same grace that had carried her through every difficult moment. Every profession depends on trust. Mine does. Yours does. The question is what we do after trust has been tested. At that moment, a young family approached the courthouse entrance. A little girl accidentally dropped several school papers onto the sidewalk as a light breeze scattered them across the plaza. Without hesitation, Ryan walked over and helped gather every page before they could blow farther away. Naomi quietly joined him, picking up the last two sheets and handing them to the child with a warm smile. The little girl thanked them both before hurrying after her parents. Ryan looked at Naomi, and for the first time since they had met, there was no barrier of suspicion between them. Only two public servants standing side by side after helping someone who needed nothing more than a simple act of respect. Naomi adjusted her purse once again and prepared to leave. Take care, Officer Mitchell, she said. You too, Commissioner Brooks, Ryan replied. She continued down the marble steps toward the evening sunlight, while Ryan remained beside the fountain for another quiet moment, understanding at last that earning respect was never about proving authority over another person. It was about choosing fairness before certainty, humility before pride, and humanity before assumption. Several months later, autumn settled quietly over the city, painting the courthouse lawn with shades of amber and gold. The maple trees lining the avenue released their leaves one by one, and each gentle breeze carried them across the same marble plaza where an ordinary afternoon had once changed the lives of two strangers. The fountain continued its steady rhythm, unchanged by the passing seasons, reminding everyone who crossed the square that time moved forward whether people were ready or not. Naomi Brooks arrived just after sunrise for another judicial conference, carrying the same weathered leather purse that had accompanied her every working day. She had never replaced it. The small crease near the zipper remained visible, not as a symbol of resentment, but as a quiet reminder that dignity could survive moments of misunderstanding without losing its strength. As she approached the courthouse steps, she noticed a familiar patrol vehicle parked along the curb. Officer Ryan Mitchell stepped out, adjusted his uniform, and greeted the morning pedestrians with calm professionalism. An elderly man carrying a grocery bag struggled slightly as several apples rolled across the sidewalk after the bag shifted in his hands. Without hesitation, Ryan hurried forward, knelt down, gathered every piece of fruit, and carefully returned them to the grateful gentleman before wishing him a pleasant day. A few minutes later, a nervous teenager approached asking for directions to the Federal Records Office. Ryan listened patiently, smiled, and walked several yards with the young visitor to ensure he reached the correct entrance instead of simply pointing toward the building. Naomi watched these small moments from a distance. They were simple acts that would never appear in a newspaper or become part of an official report, yet they revealed something more important than public recognition. They revealed habit. Ryan happened to glance toward the courthouse entrance and noticed Naomi standing there. Their eyes met briefly. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, and no invisible wall built from assumptions. Ryan tipped his cap respectfully. Naomi returned the gesture with a warm smile before continuing inside. Neither of them needed to say anything. Some conversations had already reached their conclusion long before words became unnecessary. Later that afternoon, the chief judge stood near a courtroom window overlooking the plaza and quietly observed people moving through their ordinary routines. Turning toward Naomi, he asked, "Do you believe people truly change?" Naomi looked outside for a thoughtful moment before answering. Not because they are embarrassed. Not because they are forced. They change when they finally see another person's humanity as clearly as their own. The chief judge nodded slowly, understanding that her answer extended far beyond a single encounter. As evening approached, the courthouse lights reflected softly against the polished marble floor while employees finished another day of public service. Outside, The last rays of sunlight illuminated the federal seal carved above the entrance, casting a warm glow across the wide stone steps. People continued walking through the plaza, most of them unaware of the quiet lesson that had unfolded there months earlier. Yet its impact remained, not in headlines or dramatic speeches, but in everyday choices that would shape countless future encounters. Naomi descended the steps with her familiar purse resting comfortably over her shoulder, disappearing into the golden light of the setting sun. Ryan continued greeting each passerby with the same patience and fairness, never knowing which ordinary conversation might become the most important moment in someone's life. Behind them, the fountain flowed with its steady, peaceful rhythm. The autumn leaves drifted silently across the marble, and the courthouse stood exactly where it always had, reminding anyone willing to notice that justice begins long before a courtroom opens its doors. Sometimes it begins with a single decision to see another human being without prejudice, and in that quiet choice, the strongest kind of justice is already at work.